Welcome back. This is the tutorial for the scripting language built into the RPGQuest plugin. There are a total of 23 commands currently available in the scripting language. More commands will be added. There are several that are in the works currently and will be rolled out when they are finished. This tutorial will be going over the more important commands, and it will also give you a sense of the basic techniques for writing a script. Now, if you've ever had any programming experience, that might help a little with some of the terminology I'm going to use, but programming skills are not required. This scripting language is pretty simple. In the next week or so, I will be releasing a reference guide that will give detailed descriptions of all 23 commands and all the options for them. So let's go ahead and get started. Here we have our tutorial script. Now, when creating a script for this language, you need to give it a name, and then it needs to be .escript. That stands for event script, essentially. It must have this .escript extension on the end for the plugin to recognize it. The very first command that we're going to talk about is the world command. This will specify which world your script is running in and allow you to manipulate that world later on. So to do this, we simply type world, and then in parentheses we put the name of the world. So the test world I'm using is just called world. I believe the world for the RPG Maker's map is called RPG. So it would look like RPG. There are several commands that are dependent on the fact that this command has been executed first. So it is a good practice to always have this command as the first command in your script. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is not actually a command. They're called variables. If you've ever done any programming, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. There are three different types of variables in the scripting language: mobs, locations, and numbers. Now, the scripting language does have quite extensive number manipulation abilities built into it, so you can put complex formulas into the script and it will execute them properly. With that, let's just go ahead and get started by creating a number variable. Now, to do this, we simply make a name. We'll just call this variable 1, or var1 as we're going to call this. And then you do the equal signs, and then you put number, and then in parentheses you put the expression you want evaluated. Now you can just put like 0, 50, you could do 5 times 5 divided by 3 minus 2. It does obey the rules of order operations, so keep that in mind. But basically this entire thing will get evaluated, and whatever result is created will be put into the variable var1, which you'll be able to use later on in your script. So for the sake of this script, we're going to start it at 0 because we're going to eventually use this as a counter. Now, another example would be a location. To do this, we simply type location, and then in here we have to put 3 numbers. This will be your x, your y, and your z coordinates. Now, if you had variables called x, y, and z that were numbers, you could put them in here. So we could put var1, 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 and this location would be 0, 0, 0. Now, when creating a location variable, Minecraft actually requires for locations that it has a specified world. So the location variables, when you create them with this command, actually require that you've already used the world command prior. So this is one of the examples of why having the world command as the first command of your script is always a good idea. So in this case, we want it to spawn at a certain point in the world. I've already gone in-game and gotten these numbers for where we want it to spawn. If you're using just the plain vanilla client, not the Spoutcraft client, the Spoutcraft client you can't get coordinates from for some reason, but just the plain client, if you go and you hit F3, it will display your X, your Y, and your Z coordinates. So once you have that, you can simply enter it here and store it as a location variable, and you'll be able to use this location in several other commands. So the last variable type we have is a mob. Now, To do this, we have to use another command called spawn mob. This requires 3 objects. It requires the type, the amount of health you want the mob to have, and the location variable you want it to spawn at. So in this case, we're going to have it spawn a cave spider. Now you can spawn just about every mob the game has. For some reason ghasts don't work, so I have actually removed that. The scripting language will spit out errors if you try to put in a name that doesn't work. When I release the reference guide, it will have exactly how you need to format the names. They're all lowercase, shoved together. It's real simple. You should be able to figure out most of them, like, pig is pig. Spider is spider. Zombie, zombie. I mean, something that has 2 words, it's simply cave spider. Simple as that. Now, the next thing you need to do is give it health, so we're going to give it 10 health, which should require 2 hits from a diamond sword to kill. A lot more from a wood sword, so keep that in mind. And then we're going to use var2 as the location. I would like to point out, it is not actually necessary to have the variable there. We can do it without assigning it to a variable. The script will run just fine. The reason we want to assign it to a variable, or would ever really want to, is if we wanted to manipulate what that mob was attacking later on in the script. We can specify a specific player, we can tell it to attack the closest player, we can tell it to attack the player with the most health, and all of those require a mob variable in order to operate. Now, there are a few variables that are built into the system. I've only implemented 1 so far, but I am going to implement more. The only one that is currently built in, and you can access from any script, is the number of players that are currently in the event. This variable is always called player count, with a capital P and capital C. You can override this variable by, doing like number or location or spawn mob. Doesn't actually matter. You can always reuse names. But when the script first starts, the variable player count will have the number of players in the event. And this number will get updated if new players enter the event. Like, let's say they enter the area and the event's already running. The scripting system will actually add them to the currently running event instead of starting a new event for them. So this will always keep a count. I am going to add more variables like this just for basic information, but this is a way of allowing you to scale your event. Now, in order to make it scale, we're going to have to use a loop. Now, if you've ever used a programming language before, you'll know exactly what I mean. If you've ever heard like a for loop or a while loop. Now, this scripting language is far more simplistic, so we are using something that kind of resembles a for loop, but its syntax is a bit different. It's called repeat. Now this requires 3 inputs. The first is the line number that you want to go back to. And here I've brought up the line numbers for you. So in this case, we want to go back to spawning another mob. We're going to spawn more than 1 mob here, so we want to go back to line 4. The next is the counter you're going to use. Now, in this case, we're going to use var1. We created it earlier. It's going to start at 0, and basically the repeat's going to count up to a certain number, and that's what the final parameter for this is, the final thing we have to put in. And if you want this to scale to the number of players, what you can do is you can do player count -1. Now basically what this means is it's going to spawn 1 cave spider for every player in the event. If there's only 1 player, it'll only go through this once. If there's 2 players, it'll go through it twice. Now why am I doing -1? Because our counter is starting from 0. Now if we started our counter from 1, we could just say player count. I'm used to programming by always starting things at 0, so that's naturally what I do. It doesn't matter, it's your own personal preference. For simplicity's sake, we're going to start at 1 and just go to player count. Now let's say you wanted to spawn 2 mobs for every player. How would you do that? Well, you could add another spawn mob command, which is always viable. You could go spawn mob, cave spider, or maybe if you want to mix this up a little bit, we'll go zombie, and be like, yeah, they're weakling zombies. And we're going to spawn them at the same point. Now, if you wanted to get really complicated, you can go back up here, and you could be like, location 2 equals location, and you can move it over just a few feet. One thing you have to remember, if you're adding things up here, it's going to mess up your repeats. Now we're repeating from setting the location, which won't actually cause any issues, but we want to move that down to 5 just to save us time. So now we have these 2 spawn mob commands, and this one we're going to make use location 2, and so you'll have a zombie and a cave spider spawn right next to each other, about 3 blocks apart. Now the issue with this, let's say you have 10 players. Your script's just going to spawn 20 mobs right at once, which can actually bog down the system and will overwhelm the player, really. If all of a sudden 20 mobs just go poof, they're all there. Maybe we want to stagger how they're put in. Maybe we want 2 mobs to appear, then a second later 2 more mobs to appear, and a second later 2 more mobs to appear. And just go through it that way till we've spawned all the mobs. Well, we can simply do this by adding what's called a wait command. A wait command is basically what its name says it is. It tells the script to wait a certain amount of time. Now the time we put into wait command is measured in milliseconds. So 1,000 is 1 second. You can get very precise with this. So let's say we want them to spawn 2 seconds apart. We put 2,000. And right here we've got a script that will spawn 2 times the number of players in the event mobs, half and half zombies, cave spiders, and it will spawn only 2 of them every 2 seconds. And it'll keep pumping them out, and they'll be in 2 separate spots 3 blocks apart. So right here you made a simple, complicated script. Now I'm going to go into the game here shortly and show you how we can set this up to trigger when they enter a certain area. Like, you enter a chamber, all of a sudden this triggers and you're being swarmed by cave spiders and zombies. Just to point out, there are only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 commands used in this, and I said there are a total of 23. I will do more tutorials on the rest of the commands, and there will be a reference guide released in the near future. Just here quickly, I'm going to go over real quick what the rest of these commands are, and just give a brief overview. We have an add chest item command. If you specified a location that happens to be a chest, you can add an item to it through a scripted event. This was my first attempt actually to make items respawn in chests when a person leaves. Since then I have actually developed instanced chests that actually work much better. So this command is kind of obsolete, but it's there anyways. The next command is attack healthiest, which takes only 1 parameter, and that is a mob variable. When you run this command on that mob variable, it will find the healthiest player in the event and it will cause that mob to go after them. The next command is the attack mob command. This essentially will allow you to make one mob attack another mob. The next command is the attack nearest command, which only takes 1 parameter. It has to be a mob variable, and what it does is it tells that particular mob that's associated with that variable to attack the nearest player to them that's in the event. If a player is not in the event, it won't consider them in the calculations. The next command is the attack player command, which takes a mob variable and a player name. If you really want to kill a certain player, you can use this command. It's not really that useful. It was one of the first commands I implemented, specifically because you're not going to know what your players' names are. So you might as well use attack healthiest and attack nearest instead. The next command is the change block command. If you've ever used world edit, this basically is what this does. You basically select a region and then change all the blocks in that region to a different type of block. Now this takes 2 locations and a block type to change to. This would be the ID number of the block. The next command, and I'm just going in alphabetical order so that you realize that, is called the complete objective command. This takes a quest ID and an objective ID. Now when you were setting up your quest with objectives, you did create a quest ID and an objective identifier essentially, which we're calling the ID here. This command will take both the quest ID and the objective ID, and at a certain point in your script will complete it for the user. There is a fail quest command. This could be used if a player exits a region before the event ends. It can trigger another script that will fail the quest for them. There is a message command. This command essentially allows you to broadcast a message to either all the players in the event, all the players in the world that the event is taking place, or all the players on the entire server. The next command is the replace block command. This is very similar to the change block command, except it allows you to only change certain blocks within an area to a new type. So basically you have to specify 2 locations to create the region. You have to specify the old item ID and the new item ID, and it will change all blocks with the old item ID to the type with the new item ID. There is a reward command. This works just like rewards for quests. You can reward items and economy money. There is the start command. Now this is a very interesting command because it actually allows you to start external scripts. Basically, you can start a different script from inside your script. Now what does this do for you, you might say? Well, this allows you to run several scripts in parallel. All the scripts are running in parallel. They're running independently in their own thread, if you know what that is. Basically, they're not going to run one after another. They're going to run at the same time. So let's say you wanted like 10 pillars of fire to shoot up. It's hard to control that from one single script without, one pillar of fire goes up and down, and then the next goes up and down, and the next goes up and down. If you want them to all go up and down at the same time, you would need to spawn 10 new scripts and use like the change block command, to make like lava shoot up and down. The next is the start quest command. This could be used for like you enter an area and it starts a quest. The next is the stop command. This is a counterpart to the start command, which allows you to stop an external script. This could be yourself, this could be another script. There is the time command. This allows you to manipulate the time on the server. If you want your event to be all happening at night, you can have it as soon as it starts, it switches the time to night. The next is the turn in command. This allows you to turn in a quest remotely. Once this triggers, it'll basically turn in the quest for you and, give you your rewards. The last is the weather command. This allows you to manipulate the weather. There are several different types that you can make. You can either clear the skies, create a storm, create a thunderstorm. Those are the 3 options that Minecraft gives you. And now I'm going to show you the tutorial script that we made in action in the game. Here we are in game, and I'm going to show you how to set this up to have the tutorial script that we made trigger when we enter this lovely little room. I've created a nice little treasure for us to come and get, a nice little diamond sword, even though I have one already. So the coordinates that I created are actually this block and this block. So we should have cave spiders and zombies spawning from here, and we want it to trigger as soon as we enter the room here. So like right about here, we want them to pop up and then just keep swarming you if there's more players. In order to do this, we first have to set up the region. So this is going to be a brief tutorial on how to set up regions as well. Now, if you've ever used World Edit before, you know that you can simply go //wand. And you get this little message, and in your inventory, you will find an axe. Now, I've actually already done this once, so I have a different axe, but this is a special item that you get with World Edit. And you can go and you can click a block to get your first position with the left mouse button. Then, let's say we want that block to be our second position. And we've created a region now. Now, if you want to expand it down the hallway, you just need to figure out what direction it is. And in this case, it happens to be east. and go / expand 5E for east, and now it's gone a ways down the hallway. So it was previously here, then it went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So right about here, when you hit this block, it will trigger the event. Well, once we set it up, that is. So that's all world edit stuff. You can look up the commands for that if you want to. Now we move on to the stuff specific to the Quest plugin. So what we do here is we do AQR and then create and then the name of the zone. So we'll call this tutorial. And you'll get this message, region tutorial created. What we want to do after this is actually set it up to trigger the event when we enter. Now, if you want to get reminded what the syntax for that is, you do AQR add, and it'll pop up this message telling you exactly how to set it up. As you can see, you have to give it the region name, which we just created as tutorial, whether it's an enter or exit event, what the name of the script is, and that's basically the name without the .e script on the end. So in our case it would just be tutorial, and then you can put a number at the end if you want as an optional quest ID. Basically, if you want it to only trigger if they have a certain quest, then you put the quest ID for that certain quest at the end of the command. For our purposes here, we're just going to set it up to be able to happen anytime, no matter if they have a certain quest or not. So we do AQR add tutorial enter tutorial, because that's the name of our script, and we hit enter. On enter event added. This is what you should see. Now let's get our sword out here. If we head out and then turn around, we should come back in and they should spawn. There we go. I actually think I got the coordinates slightly wrong. I thought it was going to be over here and over here, but apparently it was here and over here. But you see, if we walk out again and head right back in, once again, they do it. And right there, that's a very simple script. You can change that to any type of mob. You can set it to happen when you exit, when you enter. There's all sorts of possibilities. This is a very open scripting language, and I am going to add more to it as we go along and we determine exactly what we need. I will do future tutorials on the other commands that are available. Those will probably come out after the reference guide has come out, and that's all there is for this tutorial.